very hard. And I think I was thinking about it last night, just how our kids, like how much you can try and try and try, but it's just so hard. Like if they hear kids playing outside at 10 at night, like, what do you want? Mom, what's your problem?
Right.
You just kind of let them do it.
Right. The battle is just too great. That's the way we felt. We felt like, okay, well, you know, she's 3. So, like, whatever. It's going to be fine. But it was a really interesting experience because we didn't know that going to Seattle, that would be part of it. We hadn't really thought about that part. So, okay. So the last question I have, well, a couple of questions real quick. I have copyright. So on the book, the copyright says photographs and artwork retained by C&T Publishing, copyright and individual designs retained by the artist. Did C&T do the photography for you for the book? Is that why it says that?
Can you read that to me again?
Sure.
Elizabeth?
The copyright, photography and artwork, C&T Publishing, copyright and individual designs retained by the artist. So you hold the copyright in your quilts, but the photographs of the quilts seem to be the property of C&T Publishing. I'm curious if they, when you did the book, did they come and photograph the quilts, or sort of how did the photography of the quilts for the book and the all the different images in there, how did that happen?
Well, they have a particular way they like to photograph quilts. I have a particular way that I like my personal photographer to photograph my quilt.
Yeah.
And some of the images it'll say Chris Aaron, and that's the photographer I work with.
Yeah.
And I've retained rights to those images.
Got it. Hold on, you're breaking up.
All with kind of so I sent them all the new quilts, and they photographed. I went and had them all photographed by Chris, so that I now have.
You're breaking up. You there? You there? Hello?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, you cut out. So,
Hello?
Hi. So I got it. I lost you for just a second. So you had Chris photograph the quilts, and then a C&T photographer also. Is that what you're saying? And then you negotiated which ones would be used. Yeah, I can see the name. Yeah, that's
so
really interesting.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, are you there?
I am. So
okay.
There's certain quilts that can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. You're good now.
Okay. So there are certain quilts that I no longer own that were photographed by Chris Aaron or were in shows or whatever. So those quilts, they used Chris's images. All of the new quilts that I made for the book, I sent to C&T and they photographed. And then they gave me a CD with all of those images, but they're not high enough resolution that I could use them for anything. And I just took all of those quilts and had them re-photographed by Chris, so that I have the rights to those photographs.
Got it. Interesting. And then in the little images of like the different, step by step, was that Chris as well? Or was that, how do those work?
No, that's all C&T.
Oh, interesting. So do they come and like how does that happen? That step by step process happen?
It's very painful. Because you mail that. And so as the author of the book, and if you're doing what they call step outs, and there's a process that you're going to make a triangle, a flying geese unit, right?
Yeah.
And there are 10 steps to making that. You're going to make step number 1, stop, then make step number 1, which turns into step number 2,
yeah,
stop,
I can see where this is
and you
going.
put it in a plastic bag, and you label it and you pack it all up, and then they pull all the stuff out and take the photograph.
That's craziness. That's a lot of work. That's craziness.
It is. So it makes sense in the fact that they can't hang out in my studio and photograph me at each step. So it's the industry solution.
Right,
and magazines do it the same way.
Well, you have to stay really organized. Are you making those little bundles as you go when you're making it, or do you have to go back and do it again?
So say I made a quilt, I think for me. So say I made a quilt based on the Flying Geese units, and I would make the quilt and I'd have all that ready. And then I needed to go back and show you, the reader. I would then go back and redo each step.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of work.
Stopping at each point.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. Now, in terms of, so the book comes out, and are you paid? This is the economic side, and we're close to the end. So the economics of creating a book. So when you make the book, you've got all this fabric. Do you have a budget for the book? And then what happens? Like, do you get paid for the book? Do you get paid royalties? Sort of, what's the economic side of writing a book?
Well, you sign a contract, and you don't get any money up front. I don't really know of anyone who does. And then you're on, you have sort of mini deadlines. By mini, I mean M-I-N-I, like little deadlines, that you're going to have the first chapter written, and then you're going to have the book written, and then you're going to do the step outs, and then you're going to have the quilt done. So you're following these deadlines. They do have what's called an author's program, where you can contact businesses that have worked with CNT in the past, and they, if it's a good fit, may give you fabric or thread or batting. And I contacted all of the fabric lines on their list that had solid fabrics and said, I'm making a book, it features solid fabrics. Would you be interested in being part of it? Which you'll see that in the book I have, if I worked exclusively with one fabric line, I'll point that out. In my normal quilt making, I like to mix it up as much as possible. I don't like to work within one particular design or line. But as this process has evolved, there are a couple of fabric lines that I'm continuing to work with. In fact, that's the deadline that I'm trying to finish right now, that American Made brand, which is a all-American made quilters textile. I've been working with them. I believe in what they're doing, because it's great to have a fabric available that was made in America. Mm-hmm. And they send me fabric, and then I make them a quilt, and they share the quilt in their booth, and then I get the quilt and the fabric when it's all done. And that's a nice sort of relationship. That's great. It's not exclusive. I'm doing that with actually a couple of other fabric lines that what they're doing aligns with what I'm doing, and it's a good partnership.
Yeah. All right. So start, and then you get, once the book is out, then you get a royalty for the amount for each book that's sold. Is that sort of how it works?
Yes, and it's on quarterly. You'll get a statement showing how many books have sold. And, like you mentioned earlier, YouTube and social media and the internet have all cut into the profitability of a hard copy book. So I have made some money, but I would say that the majority of the income that comes from writing a quilt book is not from the book. It's from the exposure and the other opportunities that are related to the fact that you have a book. Having a book opens some doors.
Yeah. And the doors are to teaching and to big lectures and to other opportunities that way. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you think for quilters, and also, obviously you're displaying your work and all that other things, but do you think still like the majority of the income that professional quilters are making is from the teaching?
Yes. So and it's true for any artist, really, any working artist that's not like part of a a business, like working for Hallmark or for a big design company, that if you're an independent artist, that you are making your income through multiple streams. And for me, that would be exhibiting my work. I've, some prize money, awards, and grants. It's another income stream for me. My book, and then lecturing and teaching.
That's really interesting. Well, I just think I think you're amazing, and I think your stuff is so cool. So you're on my list. I'm going to try your technique. I'd love for you to come back, and it's just great. So we really are trying to understand this world, and you're just really cool. You're so cool. I love your stuff. It's just really great. Let me check my list and make sure we've gotten to everything. Yeah. The last thing I guess is the quilting part. So part of your quilts, they're really cool. Do you focus on how much do you quilt your own quilts? And if so, how do you strategize on what you're going to be putting in the quilt, like the quilting part of it?
Yes, I quilt my own quilt. So I have a long arm. It's a Gamma Classic Plus. It does have a stitch regulator. It's older, 12 years old. I love it. It took me a long time to sort of figure out what I wanted to do as far as the quilting part is concerned. And if you go to my blog, there are several posts that are written about the front. I have the back photographed as well as the front. Chris does photograph the back because for me, it's a two-sided object.
Yeah. And
the backs of my quilts have really isolated the quilting. So you just see the thread work, which is very labor intensive. I use what's called let me get the right name, a cross weave. I want to call them a shot cotton, but shot cotton, it's like Kleenex or tissue. Like shot cotton is actually a brand of a cross weave. And a cross weave is a textile that has a different color of thread in the warp, a different color in the wax, and they could be very similar. They could be turquoise and blue, but having those two different colors creates this little bit of a sheen. They're very beautiful fabrics, and that's what I use on the backs of all my quilts. And I've found it highlights the quilting while by somehow also sort of glossing over any sort of human flaws that might be present in the quilt making. I use Aurifil 28 weight, which is a thicker thread in my bottom, and that's the matching thread, a 4 weight on the top, and that's prevent build up on the top of my quilt, but I want a really thick, beautiful line on the back of the quilt. And I basically outline each little different piece of fabric and quilt it in, and that becomes this sort of I think of it as if you have in traditional photography, you have a negative that really just shows the values of an image, that in some ways the back of one of my quilts is the negative of the quilt in that it shows only the thread work. I've also had people say it's like the circuitry. It's like the insides of the quilt.
Yeah, very cool. Love it. That's so cool. And I think that's it. Let me think. Yep. Well, you're so cool. Anything else that you'd like to add before we end for the day?
No, I think, I'd be happy to talk to you again, Elizabeth, if you have some other questions. And I don't know if as you do this, I think it would be really interesting to talk about, and I've written a couple of blog posts on, I call it sharing my work or sharing, and I could send you the links, but it's basically, it's an ongoing conversation about, so the history of quilt making is that patterns are passed down generation to generation, and knowledge is passed down generation to generation without a whole lot of proprietary ownership.
Right.
Because that's the tradition, which is also, I think, kind of tied up with women's issues and how, that's kind of how we operate. We're much more community, sharing. I mean, whether or not we're naturally like that or that's culturally prevalent. I mean, if it's because of our culture. But the model